You shall not stand idly by when the blood of your neighbor is at stake. You know, I usually like to start with a funny story, but there's nothing funny about what's going on in Palestine. So I'm going to skip that part. And I want to do something else different. Instead of taking a passage from the Bible and putting it under the microscope and studying it, we're going to zoom out for a bigger picture, and we're going to explore how we read the Bible. This is our book, after all, most of which we share with our Jewish brothers and sisters. So we're going to talk about how we read it. What can it tell us? What does it say that drives us crazy? What are we supposed to do with this? And for our example, we're going to look at how the Bible presents the idea of the promised land. What does the Bible say about keeping it forever? What does it say about other people who live there? And then we're going to zoom out some more, and we're going to come to today. And we're going to ask, is the modern state of Israel entitled to the covenantal promises of the Bible, of the Israel of the Bible? And finally, what do we do with all this? So like most themes in the Bible, the stance on the relationship to the land is mixed. And you add to that we don't live in the world of Joshua's conquest of Canaan, or King David's rule, or even post-World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust. Things have changed, and we have to look at those changes, and we have to look at our book again. What does the Bible say to us, Parkside 2024, today? Now, one claim of the entire Bible, and Jesus concurred with this, is that God chose the descendants of Abraham and Sarah for a special relationship, not based on merit or accomplishment, but simply because that is what God chose to do. Deuteronomy 7, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. And folks, that is not what we're talking about today. The Palestine Action Team is not, let me repeat, not disputing the relationship between God and the Jewish people. What we're talking about today is the actions of the modern day state of Israel. Okay? Okay? Okay. So let's start with a question. Can we find parts of the Bible that talk about the Israelites being promised the land forever? Well, of course we can. We hear about them all the time, and they're there. 2 Samuel, he, that would be David's son, shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. And that's just one of many, and that seems pretty clear, right? But is that the only thing that the Bible has to say about this? So no microscope now. We need a bigger picture, so we're going to zoom out. The Bible presents other pictures of almost everything. First of all, there's lots of ifs. Israel would get the land, keep the land, if they observed the Torah, and that included caring for the non-Israelites living among them. It's amazing how that gets overlooked. And that's not the only way they could lose the land, but that was one. And they were also commanded to care for widows and orphans, not make them. If became a primary theme among the prophets. Let's zoom out a little bit more. According to Amos, Isaiah, Jeremiah, possession of the land was not an irrevocable promise from God. The land could be lost. Read Deuteronomy 28 sometime, but not right now. And the land was lost. It seems God did abandon Israel, not the Jewish people, the state, the political entities of Israel and Judah, because God sent someone to take it from them, according to their own writers. Now, without the land, Sarah and Abraham's descendants learned to be a religious community whose identity was in their relationship with God, as explained in their sacred writings, not based on a relationship with the land. Since then, there have always been Jewish people in Palestine, but not only Jewish people. For centuries, the descendants of Sarah and Abraham lived there among the other people who lived there also. And Jewish people have lived lots of other places among other people, just like they do today. Judaism developed as a community of the book, of the Torah, not a community of the land. Judaism doesn't need the state of Israel in order to be a thriving ethnic and faith community. Second, what about those other people? What about the unchosen? So zoom out further. The Bible is ambiguous about the other, and I'm sure you're not surprised. Book of Joshua. Without mercy, they wiped out everything in the city as something reserved for God. Man and woman, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Yeah, it says that. And that's just one example of separation. But that's not the only position. Right from the very beginning, the compiler of Genesis tells us it had been God's intention for the offspring of Abraham and Sarah to positively impact the other. Genesis 12, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It was never just about those originally chosen people. There was always someone else to consider, someone else to bless. And the blessing was for all the families of the earth, all humanity. So how about Isaiah on the other? On that day, said Isaiah, Israel will be third party with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my heritage. Now, the Egyptians and the Assyrians were Israel's enemies, and God wanted them to be included. The unchosen were to be chosen. The other matters to God. Have Jewish people been persecuted by the other? Of course. Physically, emotionally, financially, theologically. We, as the church throughout history, have persecuted Jewish people anytime we needed a scapegoat. Do we need to repent? Do we need to undo some of the evil? Do we need to work to make sure there can't be another Holocaust? Absolutely. The church is complicit in the worst anti-Semitism, and we've got a lot to answer for. And following World War II and the atrocities therein, supporting the formation of the State of Israel seemed like a really elegant solution to the problem, unless you were a Palestinian. American and European Christians were told Palestine is a land without people. Some didn't know any better, and frankly, a lot of people probably didn't try too hard to find out. And so they supported Zionism, and probably some of us did too. I know I did. We had our solution. But a fixed solution is ideology. The State of Israel has developed into a military power, a really, really big military power, backed by U.S. money. The bullied has become the bully, and it's time for us to take another look. Third, zoom out again. Now, it seems that there's some confusion between the theological claims of Judaism, on this hand, and the political claims of the State of Israel, on this hand. So, is that theological claim, the one that's based on our shared scriptures, is that theological claim, when applied to the current state of Israel, immune to criticism? And if so, why? And this brings us to the question asked by lots of serious people: is criticism of the state of Israel anti-Semitism? Is opposing what the state of Israel is doing to Palestinians anti-Semitism. Is it anti-Semitism now to call for a ceasefire, for the return of the hostages, for opening the supply lines into Palestine, for rights for the Palestinians? Is it? Well, obviously, the Palestine Action Team would say no. No, no, no. Now, listen, please. Does this mean I'm saying the Jews are no longer God's chosen people? No, no. What our team is advocating today is not about the Jews at all. We are talking about the state of Israel's current actions against Palestinians. We're not talking about the right of Jewish people to live there peacefully among the other people who already live there. We are talking about the state of Israel's current actions against the Palestinians. We're not even talking about all Israelis. We are talking about the state of Israel's current actions against Palestinians. And some of those actions are wrong by their scripture and ours, and by international law. The Israel of 1000 BCE was a petty backwater kingdom. Israel today is a military power that has the backing of the strongest nation on earth. They are not the same. The state of Israel has chosen this stance, being a strong, aggressively military power, without any reference to the constraints of that covenant. So is it convincing to appeal at the same time to the old faith tradition? Are they immune to criticism? Okay. Is it legitimate to apply that theological claim at all? Is the 21st century state of Israel entitled to take on the mantle of Israel of the Bible? Starting 700 years before Jesus, except for a 40-year period, there has been no state of Israel until 1948. Is that enough continuity to justify calling the current state of Israel the heir to all those promises of the theological claim? Okay, now zoom out some more and think about this. Over the millennia, that part of the world has been called by a lot of different names. Peliset, Syria, Palestina, Yehud, Levant, Canaan, Palestine. Perhaps the most significant public relations advantage the Zionist movement had with predominantly Christian populations was the decision to call their state Israel. What if the leaders of the new state had chosen to say Yehud as the name of the new state? It would be just as valid, just as appropriate, but how different would it feel? Do you think that we'd really be sitting here asking ourselves if the state of Yehud was above accountability? I wonder. Parksiders, there are no political, economic, social connections between the country conquered by the Assyrians in the 8th century BCE and the modern-day state of Israel. There were some really good PR people at work in the naming, and we need to keep that in mind. So, entitled, immune to criticism? So what's the bottom line? What does this crazy book say about this? And if you're looking for a simple, definite answer, well, there isn't one. The Bible doesn't speak with a single voice. It argues with itself. There's always another way to look at things. That's why we're still studying it and still wrestling with it. But with all these conflicting viewpoints, how do we arrive at a position? Okay, we're going to zoom out again, and this time we're going to use a telescope. The grand sweep of Genesis to Revelation. See, we know a little bit about this God who created all of humanity. And from in the beginning to I'm coming soon, this God has always been for the marginalized. And in the words of biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann, We ought rightly to be skeptical and suspicious of any reading of the Bible that excludes the other, because it's likely to be informed by vested interests, fear, and hopes that serve self-protection. It's wholly illusionary to imagine that such an agenda is congruent with the God of the Bible, who is commonly confessed by Jews and Christians, and I would add Muslims. So now what? Leviticus, you shall not stand idly by while the blood of your neighbor is at stake. The Palestinians are our neighbors. They are there. They can't be wished away. Room has to be made, and justice has to be done. Justice has to happen. If we don't oppose, you, me, Parkside, if we don't oppose what's being done to them, we are standing idly by while the blood of our neighbor is at stake, is being shed, actually. Now, we probably aren't going to go over there and fight, but we can fight here. The atrocities that are occurring over there are only possible because of the support that comes from over here, the U.S. military support. So we can fight. We can agitate for change. We can contact lawmakers. We can work in the area of public opinion. We aren't helpless, and we are not above accountability either. You shall not stand by when the blood of your neighbor is at stake. As Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Parkside would never choose the side of the oppressor. So let's get to work.